The ruins stand silent, yet not empty. Shadows stretch across the dust of forgotten temples. Beneath layers of time, something seems to listen, as if the stones themselves remember. For thousands of years, humanity has gazed backward, searching for its origin. But what if the past gazes back? What if time itself is not a line, but a circle, a great echo that never truly ends? At first glance, time appears simple, a sequence, a river flowing in one direction, birth to death, dawn to dusk, cause to effect. That's the story we've built our world upon, our calendars, our histories, our sense of reality. Yet across the ancient world, there are whispers of something else. Fragments of stories where time bends, folds, or repeats. Legends where the future speaks to the past. And travelers, not of land, but of centuries, walk among men. In the deserts of Egypt, hieroglyphs speak of gods who came from the stars, bearing knowledge of seasons and stars not yet visible. In the jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya inscribed cosmic calendars spanning tens of thousands of years, cycles so vast that they seem to defy human imagination. And in the valleys of Mesopotamia, the oldest tablets ever found describe visitors who measured the heavens and saw what had not yet come to pass. To the modern mind, these are myths, the poetry of a people trying to understand the universe. But to others, they sound like fragments of a forgotten science. Picture this. The year is 2025. A modern scientist peers into the mathematics of space-time, relativity, quantum entanglement, wormholes. The theories begin to bend toward an unsettling truth, that time may not flow at all, but exist all at once. Every moment, past, present, and future, simultaneously real. Now, imagine a civilization that understood that truth not in theory, but in practice. A people who learned to step outside the flow, to walk between the pages of history like readers flipping through a book. Could such knowledge have existed long before us? And if it did, where did it go? In nearly every ancient culture, there is a moment, a rupture, when knowledge appears suddenly. Writing, architecture, astronomy, mathematics, they emerge not as gradual inventions, but as gifts, complete, refined, and precise. It's as if someone, or something, handed them over. The Sumerians called their teachers the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens. The Egyptians spoke of Thoth, the god who taught them writing, timekeeping, and the secrets of the stars. The Greeks remembered Prometheus, who stole divine knowledge and gave it to mankind. Each story carries the same pattern, wisdom arriving too early, too suddenly, like messages slipped into the past by hands from another age. Meanwhile, in our own time, physicists search for a theory of everything. They look for equations that describe the universe as a timeless whole, and the deeper they look, the more reality seems to behave like a loop, where cause and effect blur and the future can reach backward. Could the ancients have understood this intuitively? Could their myths be coded descriptions of time manipulation? Their gods, travelers who crossed the temporal ocean long before we built ships to sail the seas? A curious clue lies in language itself. In ancient Sanskrit, the word Kala means both time and death. In Greek, Chronos means the devourer, the one who consumes all. Time was never seen as a straight path, but as a living force, something that moves, breathes, and even hungers. If so, what happens when that force is controlled or disturbed? There are tales, scattered across continents, of cities vanishing overnight, of days that lasted twice as long, of celestial events repeating out of sequence. In the Bible, the sun stands still. In Mesoamerican lore, the sky darkens for days while the heavens reorder themselves. To us, these are mythic exaggerations. To ancient eyes, perhaps, side effects of something greater. Imagine an ancient traveler, one who could cross epochs with the press of a mechanism or a phrase of forgotten geometry. He steps into the world of the pharaohs, bearing tools of impossible precision. He watches civilizations rise, teaches them to build, to measure, to remember, and when his purpose is fulfilled, he leaves, vanishing into the folds of his own century, leaving behind only symbols, temples, and stories that grow into gods. Over time, his memory fades into legend, but the traces remain. Strange alignments, impossible artifacts, inexplicable knowledge. The footprints of someone who was not supposed to be there. As centuries pass, we build our sciences, our machines, our telescopes. We think we are advancing forward. But what if we are only returning? What if every discovery we make is a rediscovery? Fragments of a technology that once guided the ancients through the corridors of time. Somewhere in the ruins of a forgotten city, a tablet lies buried. Its inscriptions describe not a ritual, but a mechanism. Not a god, but a traveler. And as archaeologists brush away the dust, the lines shimmer faintly under the light. Patterns resembling the mathematics of relativity, the language of space-time. Coincidence or memory? The camera drifts above the ruins as the wind rises again. Sand sweeps through corridors carved with stars. The narrator's voice softens. Perhaps the ancients did not fear time because they understood it. Perhaps they walked its pathways freely and left us stories so we would remember. The image fades to black. Only a single question remains, whispered like an echo through the ages. What if the past was never truly the past, but the beginning of a loop that we are still inside? Time travel. To us, it is the province of fiction, a dream of science and imagination. But the idea itself is not modern. It is ancient, older than our words for it. The term time travel was first written in 1895 by H.G. Wells. The Time Machine, a story of a man who built a contraption to journey into the far future. It became a cornerstone of modern thought, shaping how we imagine the flow of time. But the question remains, was Wells the first to dream of it, or merely the first to remember? Across the oldest myths of Earth, scattered over languages long forgotten, there are stories of beings who did not move through time, but between it. In the Hindu Mahabharata, King Kakudmi ascends to the realm of the god Brahma to seek advice for his daughter, marriage. He waits there for what feels like only minutes. But when he returns to Earth, thousands of years have passed. The world has changed. The forests have grown. Civilizations have risen and fallen. It is, by every definition, a story of temporal displacement. In Japan's tale of Urashima Taro, a fisherman visits an undersea palace. He stays for what seems like a few joyful days. When he returns home, his village is gone. Centuries have passed, and he turns to dust before he can speak. And in the sands of Mesopotamia, the oldest Sumerian legends speak of the Anunnaki, beings who descended from the sky to shape the world, yet who walked among the stars as men among fields. They came, they built, and then they vanished, sometimes returning as if their homes lay not above the earth, but ahead of it. The pattern repeats. Every civilization speaks of teachers from beyond the horizon of time. In Greece, they called them the Chronos, children of Chronos, entities who moved freely between the ages. In Norse tales, Odin hung upon the tree of the world and glimpsed the fates of all men, past and yet to come. In the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the gods spoke the dawn before the dawn existed. Each story tells of knowledge appearing before its time, of people out of place, out of sequence. And in the silence between these tales lies a strange suggestion that what we call myth might be a fractured record of something real. Picture an ancient civilization standing beneath unfamiliar stars. A stranger arrives, his tools unlike any seen before. He speaks of the sky as if he has charted it for millennia. He knows when the floods will come, when the stars will shift. He leaves behind numbers, patterns, calendars, clues that unlock the rhythm of the universe. Then he disappears. To those left behind, he is a god. To us, perhaps, a traveler, a visitor from another age. Modern science tells us that time is not absolute. It bends, it stretches, it slows near gravity, and can even reverse its flow within the mathematics of relativity. Einstein's equations suggest that, in theory, time travel is possible. But the ancients may have grasped this long before equations were written. They imagined time not as a straight road, but as a wheel, cycles of creation and destruction, each revolution bringing the same souls, the same events, the same patterns, again and again. What if these cycles were not metaphor, but observation? What if they had seen the loop of history firsthand, from a vantage point outside it? In temples from India to Egypt, carvings show wheels, spirals, and suns encircled by serpents biting their own tails. To scholars, they symbolize eternity, but to those who listen differently, they might represent something else: diagrams of recursion, of repeating timelines. The Ouroboros, the serpent devouring itself, could be more than a symbol of life and death. It could be the oldest diagram of the paradox itself. A paradox arises when cause and effect trade places. A message from the future that creates the past. A loop where history feeds itself. And in many ancient accounts, such loops appear disguised as miracles. In the Gospel of Matthew, an angel appears to Joseph in a dream, warning him to flee before the massacre of the innocents. In that moment, prophecy alters history. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero encounters a man who survived a great flood that had not yet occurred in his own age, a survivor of tomorrow. What if prophecy, in its earliest form, was not divine vision, but the echo of temporal interference, knowledge leaking backward across the fragile walls of causality? There are odd moments, even in archaeology, that feel like fingerprints of the paradox. A Roman dodecahedron, a bronze object with 12 faces, found in layers far older than its supposed invention. An Egyptian carving depicting what seems to be a modern light bulb. A Mayan tablet showing a man surrounded by mechanical shapes, what some claim resembles a spacefaring craft, each dismissed by science as misinterpretation, coincidence, or hoax. And yet, together, they whisper the same question. Why do fragments of the future keep showing up in the past? Centuries later, as physicists map quantum fields and wormholes, they rediscover concepts eerily familiar to those old myths. Gods of time, gates of return, the eternal recurrence. Science, it seems, is slowly rewriting the poetry of the ancients in mathematical form. And somewhere between those equations and the old stories lies the first paradox. Perhaps we are not inventing the idea of time travel at all. Perhaps it was never an invention, but a memory. A memory of a time when humanity, or something before humanity, found the door and stepped through it. In every age, the story repeats. Someone remembers the future, someone forgets the past, and the loop begins again. They came from the sky. That is how every story begins. In Egypt, they were the Netters, radiant beings who descended to teach language, architecture, and the ordering of time. In Mesopotamia, they were the Anunnaki, those who walked between heaven and earth. And across the ocean, in Mesoamerica, they were the feathered serpents, the shining ones, the teachers who came from the stars and promised to return. At first glance, these are myths, allegories written by civilizations trying to explain the unexplainable. But what if the gods were never divine? What if they were travelers? Not from another world, but from another when. The Egyptians wrote of Thoth, the keeper of time, the measure of the heavens. He was said to speak the future into being, to record events that had not yet occurred. Temples dedicated to him align perfectly with astronomical cycles, as though their builders knew of precession, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, thousands of years before modern astronomy rediscovered it. How could they have known? In Mesoamerica, the god Quetzalcoatl arrived bearing knowledge of calendars, mathematics, and the movements of the stars. He taught agriculture, healing, and architecture, technologies that appeared suddenly, fully formed, as if imported from elsewhere. When his work was done, he sailed east, promising to return in a future age when the stars would realign. Thousands of years later, when Spanish ships appeared on the horizon, the Aztecs believed the prophecy fulfilled. They thought Quetzalcoatl had come back. But what if the legend was not a prophecy, but a schedule? In Mesopotamia, Enki descended from the heavens to raise humanity from darkness. He taught writing, irrigation, and astronomy. The Sumerian king lists record reigns lasting tens of thousands of years, timelines impossible by human measure, unless, of course, time flowed differently for those who ruled. Everywhere we look, the pattern repeats. A figure arrives bearing impossible knowledge. He shapes a civilization, builds its foundations, and departs with a promise: I will return when the cycle turns again. And the cycle always turns. To ancient people, these visitors were gods. To us, they might be something else entirely, beings who found a way to step beyond time-eston linear flow. Not extraterrestrials, but temporals. If a civilization mastered time travel, it would not appear as a swarm of spaceships in the sky. It would appear as a single, quiet figure, arriving at exactly the right moment to alter the course of history. A seed planted here, a symbol carved there, a nudge in the development of mathematics or language. Each intervention subtle, almost invisible, until thousands of years later, the sum of those actions reshapes the destiny of humankind. Imagine it. A being from a far future age, standing on the banks of the Nile, speaking with a young scribe who will one day carve the first hieroglyphs. Or a figure cloaked in feathers, teaching an early civilization to count the days by the motion of Venus, a planet whose cycle would later define entire calendars. To us, these stories are sacred myths, but to the traveler, they might have been missions, a program of guidance or correction. There are curious hints buried within the records. Egypt Izedfu texts describe a primeval age when the gods built the world once before, after it had been destroyed. They speak of rebuilding after a great flood, not the first flood, but the second. Time in their telling was not a line, but a circle. Creation followed destruction, endlessly repeating. And in every cycle, the same architects returned to begin again. In Mesoamerica, the Popol Vuh tells of 4 suns, 4 worlds destroyed and remade, each by the intervention of divine beings. Each time, knowledge was reintroduced, humanity rebuilt, and history restarted. If one reads the text as mythology, it speaks of gods. But if one reads it as chronology, it describes temporal resets. Suppose time travel was known not as technology, but as ritual, guarded by priesthoods who misunderstood what they were preserving. Symbols like the Eye of Ra, the winged disc, and the calendar stone may have once been schematic diagrams. Not spiritual icons, but instructions, encoded for those who could read them. Perhaps this is why ancient temples and pyramids were built with obsessive astronomical precision, each aligned to solstices, equinoxes, or star risings. Each one a kind of temporal anchor, a point where heaven, or time, could be crossed. Could these sites have functioned as coordinates, marking the intersection between epochs? A time traveler might not need a machine at all. Only the right place, at the right moment, under the right alignment of stars. There's another curious thread. In nearly every ancient language, the words for God, light, and return share a root. The divine is always luminous, and it always promises to come back. What if the light was literal? A distortion of space-time, a shimmer of radiation seen when a being steps through the fabric of history. To a Bronze Age farmer, it would look like the arrival of the sun itself. Even now, the ruins whisper that their builders knew something we have forgotten. They speak of cycles, of golden ages that end, of gods who vanish into the sky and reappear when the stars reset. Perhaps those gods were travelers, custodians of a looped timeline, returning to restore what was lost in the last collapse. And perhaps, as myths foretold, they will return again. Not from another world, but from our own distant future, coming back to remind us how to begin. Once more, in the ancient Indian worldview, time was not a line. It was a wheel, an endless cycle of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. They called it the Yuga cycle, 4 vast ages turning endlessly like gears in a cosmic clock. Each age shorter and darker than the last, each destined to collapse and begin again. In the first age, Satya Yuga, truth reigned. The earth was in perfect harmony. The gods walked among men, and knowledge flowed freely. Then came Treta, Dvapara, and finally Kali Yuga, the age of iron, of confusion. Here memory fades and humanity forgets what it once knew. And when that forgetting is complete, the wheel resets. A new dawn begins. To modern ears, this sounds like mythology, an allegory for moral decline or cosmic rhythm. But what if it was more? What if the ancients were describing not philosophy, but physics? In the Mahabharata, one of the world's oldest epics, there are tales of flying machines, luminous weapons, and battles that resemble nuclear fire. They are said to have occurred thousands of years ago, yet they read like the memories of a civilization far beyond its supposed age. When asked how such things could exist in the distant past, the sages replied simply, they existed in the last cycle. The yugas, they said, were not symbolic. They were literal epochs, vast spans of time measured in millions of years. Each cycle ends in destruction, flood, fire, or the collapse of knowledge. But a few always survive, guardians of memory who carry fragments of science, art, and history into the next age. The cycle continues, but not perfectly. Each restart is slightly altered, like a record replaying with a faint scratch. Could it be that these cycles are not just metaphors for morality, but evidence of temporal loops? If a civilization mastered time itself, it might move between these cycles, stepping backward to preserve what it could, or forward to rebuild after catastrophe. Some texts hint at this directly. The Vishnu Purana speaks of beings who appear at the end of one yuga to restore balance and prepare the world for renewal. They arrive from above, luminous and ageless. They leave when the wheel turns, and when they go, humanity must begin again. To those who witnessed them, these beings would seem divine, eternal, omniscient. But perhaps they were travelers, engineers of time, ensuring the continuity of a repeating world. Maybe this is why ancient India described the universe as a dream that repeats, a projection that dissolves and reforms across infinite cycles, a simulation, rebooting itself. Even the mathematics of the yugas is astonishing. They describe vast numbers, 432,000 years, 864,000, 1,296,000, each one a multiple of precise astronomical constants. These are not arbitrary values. They align with solar and lunar precession cycles. To calculate them requires a deep understanding of celestial motion, knowledge supposedly impossible for Bronze Age cultures, unless, of course, they inherited it. And then there is the mystery of Kalachakra, the wheel of time. A teaching from Tibetan and Indian tradition that describes time not as something that passes, but as something that can be navigated. The Kalachakra Mandala, a sacred geometric diagram, is said to represent the mechanics of the universe. Its circles within circles mirror both cosmic motion and the cycles of human consciousness. Some modern researchers suggest it may encode mathematical relationships akin to space-time curvature, a kind of spiritual physics. Imagine if the ancients perceived time the way we perceive space, something that could be traveled, measured, and mapped. Their rituals, then, were not superstition, but calibration. Their chants and symbols, not prayers, but equations. There's a verse in the Rig Veda that says, "The wise see time as a wheel with 12 spokes, upon which all beings ride." To the poet, it was metaphor. To the physicist, it could describe a 12-dimensional model of cyclical time, a structure where each spoke represents a repeating epoch, slightly offset from the last. If the universe itself moves in loops, then time travel would not be an aberration. It would be a return, a remembering. An advanced civilization might not need machines to move through time. They would only need to understand the rhythm of the wheel, the points where the circle folds upon itself. Some mystics in India still speak of those who walk the Kalachakra, beings who can appear in any age because they exist outside the turning of the wheel. They are neither born nor die. They simply enter and exit history when the cycle demands it. In myth, they are called avatars. In science, they might be temporal custodians, consciousnesses synchronized with the pulse of cosmic time. And what if humanity itself is part of this design? Perhaps memory, déjà vu, and intuition are faint echoes of our passage through prior loops. Dreams of lost ages might not be dreams at all. When the ancients described the wheel turning, they spoke not with fear, but reverence, because every ending was also a beginning, every destruction a chance to rebuild. And somewhere between the spokes of time, the travelers, the teachers, would always return to guide the dawn of the next world. Maybe that's why, even in our modern age, we sense the pattern repeating. Our technology accelerates, our knowledge deepens. Yet our myths remain the same. Stories of golden ages lost, and gods who will return when the cycle renews. Perhaps they never left. Perhaps they are waiting, beyond the veil of time, for the wheel to turn once more. Beneath the turquoise waters of the Aegean Sea lies a wreck that changed history. A Roman-era ship scattered across the seabed like a time capsule, its cargo long forgotten, until divers stumbled upon it by accident in 1901. Among the corroded statues and broken amphorae was something no one expected, a small lump of bronze encrusted in coral and time. When it was cleaned, it revealed gears, impossibly fine, intricate, precise. Teeth interlocked in perfect harmony, smaller than any known engineering of the ancient world. It became known as the Antikythera Mechanism, the world's first analog computer. Historians were stunned. How could such sophistication exist in a world that hadn't yet mastered the compass? It could predict solar eclipses, track the lunar phases, and forecast planetary alignments decades, even centuries, in advance. For comparison, no other mechanical device of similar complexity would appear for at least 1,000 years. It was as if a fragment of the future had slipped into the past. Mainstream explanations struggled to keep up. Some said it was the work of Archimedes, or a lost genius from the Hellenistic age. Others claimed it was a unique masterpiece, a one-time marvel that somehow vanished without legacy or replica. But how could a civilization capable of building a machine like this forget how to build it? The gears were cut with precision, requiring tools that, officially, did not exist. Each tooth was angled to compensate for astronomical irregularities, as if its creator understood not just mechanics, but the subtleties of orbital motion. Etched upon its face were inscriptions referring to cycles, the Saros, the Metonic, the Callipic, all used to calculate eclipses and planetary returns. It wasn't merely a calendar, it was a time map. To modern scientists, it represents a stunning leap of intellect. But to others, it whispers of something else. What if the Antikythera mechanism wasn't invented in Greece but remembered there? What if it was built using knowledge recovered, or rediscovered, from an earlier epoch? Ancient writers often spoke of machines of the gods. The Greek hero Daedalus was said to craft statues that moved on their own. Hephaestus, the divine smith, built golden servants and self-propelled chariots. To the ancients, these were myths. To us, they sound eerily mechanical. It's easy to dismiss mythology as imagination, but myths often preserve memory, distorted, symbolic, yet rooted in something once real. Could the Antikythera mechanism have been a fragment of such memory? A remnant of a civilization that had once understood the deep mathematics of time? Consider the strange coincidences. The device tracks the precession of the moon, a phenomenon not precisely measured until the 19th century. Its planetary dials use ratios that match those of modern astronomical models. It even accounts for the irregular motion of the moon's orbit, something not fully understood until Isaac Newton. Whoever built it was not guessing. They were calculating. When X-ray tomography revealed its internal structure in the early 2000s, engineers realized it contained over 30 bronze gears in a compact frame, a design so sophisticated that even 18th century clockmakers would have admired it. It shouldn't exist in 100 BCE, and yet, there it was. Some researchers quietly proposed an unsettling possibility, that it was a copy. A reverse-engineered attempt to recreate something far older, a lost machine of unknown origin. A relic not of invention, but remembrance. Imagine an ancient craftsman handed a shattered mechanism of mysterious design. He cannot grasp its full purpose, but he can imitate its parts. He rebuilds what he can, guided by fragments of knowledge that feel both alien and familiar. The result is imperfect, a shadow of the original, but enough to preserve the idea. Enough to hint that time itself could be measured with mechanical precision. The Antikythera mechanism may have been such a shadow, a remnant of a civilization that had learned to chart not just the sky, but the flow of time through it. Some have even suggested it was a navigation tool, not for oceans, but for epochs. A portable star map for travelers who moved not across space but across ages. If one could travel through time, one would need coordinates, fixed points in the sky, patterns that repeat. The heavens provide those anchors. The stars move, but predictably. Planets shift in cycles measurable across millennia. The Antikythera mechanism could serve as a temporal compass, a way to synchronize one ege's journey through the continuum. Such speculation may sound impossible, but the ancients often spoke of machines hidden beneath the sea, relics of ages drowned in cataclysm. Plato wrote of Atlantis, a civilization destroyed, but said to have mastered the heavens. Could the mechanism be one of its surviving fragments, washed ashore in Greece, carried unknowingly by sailors who thought it only treasure? Even its discovery feels symbolic, a device that tracks time, found buried beneath the waves, as if waiting for the right century to resurface. When divers first brought it up, they thought it was a rock. For 2,000 years it lay silent, its gears corroded, its purpose forgotten. Then, like a message from another age, it returned. Perhaps it wasn't the only one. Other fragments have been reported. Small, gear-like objects unearthed in sites that predate Greece entirely. Each dismissed as anomaly, misidentification, coincidence. But patterns rarely occur by chance. If time travel ever existed, its artifacts might not look like glowing portals or futuristic machines. They might look like this, a lump of bronze, too advanced for its era, hidden in plain sight. A device out of context, quietly defying the timeline. The sea still holds its secrets. Beneath layers of sand and salt, perhaps more, such machines sleep. Relics from ages when time itself was a craft. And one day, when another diver descends into the blue silence, a glint of ancient metal might once again rise from the deep. a whisper from those who once knew how to navigate not just the world, but the centuries themselves. They called them seers, prophets, oracles who glimpsed beyond the veil of the present. Throughout history, they appeared again and again, men and women who claimed to see futures not yet written. Their visions shaped kings, empires, and entire civilizations. But what if prophecy was not divine inspiration, but the faint echo of a science long forgotten? In the 16th century, a French apothecary named Michel de Nostradamus began to write under the veil of mystery. His verses, cryptic, poetic, filled with veiled language, spoke of wars, kings, and calamities centuries beyond his time. To skeptics, they were vague coincidences. To believers, they were windows into destiny itself. But what if Nostradamus wasn't guessing? What if his visions came not from faith, but from fragments, remnants of something ancient, something that once allowed humanity to glimpse the shape of tomorrow? His diaries mention mirrors, lenses, and water bowls, devices used in trance, reflecting both light and time. He spoke of seeing within the stars and the eternal hour, as though he believed time was not linear, but accessible. Could these rituals have been more than symbolism? Could they have been reconstructions, imperfect echoes of a lost temporal science? Centuries before Nostradamus, another oracle whispered through history, the Oracle of Delphi. High in the mountains of Greece, priestesses inhaled vapors rising from beneath the earth. In trance, they spoke words that kings recorded, generals obeyed, and philosophers pondered. Their prophecies often came true. The ancients believed the gods spoke through them. Modern science offers explanations: gases, hallucinations, coincidence. But one detail remains curious. The oracles described their visions as entering the folds of time. They said they could see both past and future as one. They did not predict, they observed. What if these oracles accessed a field of consciousness beyond our current understanding? A dimension where time flows differently, where events leave impressions like footprints in sand, visible to those who know how to look. Perhaps the ancient rituals, incense, vibration, altered states, were not superstition, but techniques for tuning the mind to the resonant frequency of time itself. And far to the west, across oceans and centuries, another kind of prophecy emerged. The Mayan astronomers of Mesoamerica did not claim visions. They calculated them. Their long-count calendar tracked cosmic cycles spanning thousands of years. It predicted eclipses, planetary conjunctions, even solar maximums, with accuracy that rivals modern computers. How could a civilization without telescopes know the mechanics of the solar system with such precision? Their calendar did more than mark years. It mapped cycles, vast, repeating patterns of time. Each cycle ended with renewal, destruction, or transformation, and every prophecy was based not on faith, but mathematics. Could this be another form of temporal awareness, a way to read the rhythm of the universe, to anticipate the echoes of events long before they arrive? Across cultures, the idea repeats that time is not a line, but a fabric, and certain minds or certain tools can see its weave. There are stories, too, of ancient mirrors said to reflect not faces, but destinies. The Aztec obsidian mirror of Tezcatlipoca, the looking glass of Solomon, each associated with vision, foresight, and the bending of reality. Could these have been instruments, primitive interfaces for temporal observation? One legend tells of the Mirror of the Magi, a device that could reveal what was yet to come, powered by the alignment of the stars. Its users were said to go mad after staring too long, perhaps not from the supernatural, but from witnessing time itself unfold, endlessly looping. Even in the modern age, whispers of temporal glimpses persist. In laboratories studying quantum entanglement, particles appear to communicate across time, influencing each other before the signal could have traveled. Some experiments suggest that information can move backward, subtly affecting past states. If nature allows such retrocausal effects at the smallest scales, might ancient minds have learned to harness them on a grander, more intuitive level? It's possible that the oracles and prophets were not anomalies, but descendants of a forgotten discipline, the remnants of an older civilization as understanding of consciousness as a temporal instrument. When the technology was lost, its rituals became religion, its science became myth, and what once was a precise art became prophecy. Perhaps this explains the strange consistency of visionary language. The prophets of every age describe time not as distance, but as memory, an ocean where moments ripple outward. To them, the future already exists, like light from a distant star. They merely learned how to see it. Could Nostradamus, Delphi, and the Mayan astronomers all have drawn from the same ancient current, a knowledge that predates their cultures, passed down in fragments, misunderstood as mysticism? If so, prophecy is not prediction, it's recognition. A brief, dangerous contact with the architecture of time. The philosopher Plotinus once wrote that the soul is eternal and sees eternity all at once. Maybe these seers glimpsed what we all sense faintly, that time is not moving past us, but surrounding us. And some, for reasons still unknown, find cracks in that enclosure. When they look through, what they see changes history. Because every prophecy, true or false, alters the path it foretells. And perhaps that is the greatest paradox of all. To see the future is to change it. The prophets may have been many things: mystics, mathematicians, visionaries, or remnants of a science lost to the tides of time. But in their whispers, one idea remains: that time is not fixed. It breathes, it folds, and somewhere between those folds, the impossible becomes visible, for those who remember how to look. He was an ordinary man by every visible measure, a scribe in ancient Babylon, tasked with recording the rhythms of the heavens. His reed stylus pressed into wet clay, he charted the movements of stars, moons, and shadows across the sky. It was his duty to preserve order, to make sense of the cosmic dance that guided kings and farmers alike. But on one particular tablet, something extraordinary was written: an eclipse. Not one he had seen, but one that would not occur for thousands of years. Yet the record was perfect. The time, the alignment, the celestial coordinates, flawless. How could a man who lived in the age of clay and torchlight predict an event known only to astronomers with satellites and supercomputers? Coincidence, perhaps, or something else entirely. Historians have debated the meaning of this ancient record for decades. Some suggest it was a mythological motif, a symbolic darkening of the sun. Others argue it was simply copied from an older text. But the pattern matches no known eclipse visible in his lifetime, and the precision, down to the hour, is unnerving. To understand this anomaly, we must step back into the world of Babylon itself, a civilization obsessed with time. They were among the first to divide the day into 24 hours, to measure minutes, seconds, even predict the cycles of the moon with eerie consistency. But this scribe went further. He didn't just map the heavens. He seemed to know what was coming. Some scholars have whispered of an impossible hypothesis, that this man had access to knowledge not of his era, but of another, that perhaps, through means unknown, he glimpsed the future sky. If time travel was ever known in antiquity, perhaps it wasn't mechanical. No machines of brass or light. Perhaps it was mathematical, encoded in geometry, in rhythm, in celestial recurrence. Those who mastered the language of time didn't need to move through it. They could read it. The Babylonians believed the heavens were a mirror of Earth, that every motion above had its echo below. And maybe, in the precise silence between stars, this lone scribe heard something more, a whisper from a future not yet born. He wrote it down, as any good scribe would, not knowing that his tablet would survive the rise and fall of empires, that one day, long after his dust had vanished, modern scientists would rediscover his words and find them impossibly accurate. A forgotten man who, by all logic, should not have known what he knew. And yet, he did. Maybe he wasn't a prophet. Maybe he wasn't a mathematician ahead of his time. Maybe, just maybe, he was a messenger, not across space, but across time. A ripple from the future preserved in clay, a reminder that even in the deepest past, someone, or something, already knew tomorrow. Across the plains of Wiltshire, England, massive stones rise from the earth like frozen sentinels. Stonehenge, a circle of megaliths perfectly aligned to the solstices, standing for millennia. Every year, the sun rises over the heelstone on the summer solstice, as if obeying a design laid down thousands of years ago. And yet, no one knows exactly why or who first imagined it. Half a world away, in the deserts of southern Egypt, another assembly of stones defies expectation. Nabta Playa. Clusters of massive slabs arranged in geometric precision, tracking the motion of the stars. Some align with Orion, some with the summer solstice. The structures predate the pyramids, suggesting an understanding of astronomy far beyond what should have been possible. And even earlier still, in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe rises from the soil. Built over 12,000 years ago, it contains pillars engraved with symbols, animals, and abstract patterns. Some align with celestial events, others with geometric principles that modern scholars are only beginning to understand. All of it predates agriculture, predates writing, yet it was built with intent, knowledge, and planning. What unites these ancient monuments? Beyond their stones, beyond their human labor, there is something curious: alignment. Each structure corresponds to cosmic events: solstices, equinoxes, star risings, lunar cycles, precise patterns repeated across continents and epochs. Archaeologists often call them observatories, places to mark the passage of time, to schedule planting, to honor deities. But some patterns seem too precise, too deliberate to be explained solely by ritual. The alignments span millennia. They suggest knowledge that could predict celestial motion centuries, even thousands of years into the future. And that raises a question that defies convention. What if these were not merely observatories, but markers, coordinates, left behind as if by travelers who knew how to navigate not only space, but time itself? Imagine arriving in a new epoch. You step from your vessel, or from some impossible device, onto a familiar terrain. You need reference points, landmarks to calibrate your arrival, to orient yourself with the heavens. Could these massive stones have served as such anchors? Silent, enduring, aligned to the sun and stars in ways only a mind fluent in time could understand. Stonehenge was rebuilt over centuries. Nabta Playa shows evidence of careful placement and adjustment. Göbekli Tepe's pillars are carved with symbols and animal motifs, some of which echo constellations. Each site is deliberate, yet separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles. The similarities are uncanny. Even their construction is remarkable. The stones at Stonehenge weigh dozens of tons, transported from miles away. Nabta Playa's slabs were moved across deserts by people with no wheeled vehicles. Göbekli Tepe's pillars were quarried and raised by communities still hunter-gatherers in practice. The technical skill is staggering, but the intention is even more striking. They point, they mark, they align. Some researchers argue for a shared ancient knowledge now lost. Perhaps a network of civilizations, connected through trade or oral tradition, passed along these principles. But others suggest a stranger possibility, that these monuments reflect visits by beings who understood time differently. Travelers from another age or another cycle, leaving markers for return. There are anomalies in the alignments. Some stones correspond to events far in the future: eclipses, planetary conjunctions, shifts in star positions that occur centuries after construction. How could people without telescopes, clocks, or written predictive science anticipate such precision? Unless, of course, they had help, guidance from those who had already seen these events. Göbekli Tepe contains reliefs that are difficult to interpret. Some depict animals in impossible combinations. Others suggest abstract diagrams. Could these be instructions? Mathematical models encoded in stone. Maps not just of geography, but of temporal coordinates. Nabta Playa includes an arrangement of stones resembling a solar calendar, but with variations that correspond to the motion of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, as it would appear thousands of years later. Stonehenge, too, seems to encode precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis in its layout. These were phenomena that even modern astronomy only fully understands with telescopes and mathematics. And yet, someone, long ago, anticipated them. Perhaps the megaliths are more than monuments. Perhaps they are the footprints of time travelers. Not gods, not aliens, but humans or beings who understood the cycles of the cosmos. Their arrival marked by stone. Their presence recorded in alignment. Walk among them, and the effect is immediate. The air seems heavier. Shadows stretch differently. Stars appear in patterns that feel familiar, as if the monuments themselves remember some lost epoch. Some even suggest these sites form a network. Markers spaced across continents. A grid that encodes knowledge spanning thousands of years. A map, a calendar, a library, all written in stone. If time travel was possible, these stones could be navigational tools. A traveler steps into an epoch, finds the monument, aligns it with the sun or stars, and calibrates their position in both space and time. The monuments endure long after the travelers vanish, awaiting the next arrival. And perhaps that is why they feel alive. Stonehenge, Nabta Playa, Göbekli Tepe. All whisper of intelligence beyond their era. They are not simply echoes of the past. They are echoes in time itself. Centuries later, archaeologists and astronomers will study them, marveling at their precision. They will ask how such knowledge was possible, and the stones will remain silent, guarding their secrets. Markers left by those who walked between ages, waiting for someone who could read their language. If we listen closely, perhaps we can still hear it, the quiet echo of time, pressed into stone. History, we are told, moves in a straight line, a neat sequence of cause and effect. Kings, wars, empires, revolutions. But between those lines, there are voids. Centuries that seem to stretch thinner than they should. Ages where time itself feels tampered with. Historians call them lost years. Entire epochs that appear compressed or out of place. And within those gaps, the story of humanity doesn't quite add up. The most haunting example is known as the phantom time hypothesis. It suggests that nearly 3 centuries of our calendar, from roughly 614 to 911 AD, never actually happened. According to this theory, the early Middle Ages were not a time of knights and castles, but an illusion. Fabricated history. Inserted years. Phantom time. It began with a simple inconsistency. When researchers compared ancient documents, astronomical events, and architectural progressions, something strange appeared. The stars didn't match the calendar. Solar eclipses, recorded in medieval chronicles, didn't align with what astronomy predicts. Buildings attributed to the 8th century seemed far too advanced, or far too primitive, for their supposed date. The German historian Herbert Illig, in the 1990s, proposed the unthinkable, that Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and perhaps Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII conspired to rewrite time itself. They added 297 fictitious years to place Otto's reign conveniently in the year 1000 AD, a symbolic date of power and prophecy. If Illig's theory were true, then the year we call 2025 would actually be closer to 1728. nearly 3 centuries of history. Charlemagne, early medieval Europe, the Carolingian Renaissance, would be little more than inventions. A cosmic accounting error written into our timeline. Most scholars reject the idea. They call it pseudoscience, a misunderstanding of dating methods. But still, the anomalies remain. Astronomical alignments recorded in old chronicles don't always match where the stars should have been. Archaeological layers sometimes jump abruptly, as if centuries of slow evolution were skipped. Technologies appear, disappear, and reappear in impossible rhythms. Roman concrete, for example, vanishes for over 1,000 years, only for modern chemists to rediscover its secret in the 20th century. Greek fire, Damascus steel, the Baghdad battery, all glimpses of brilliance that flare suddenly, then vanish without continuity. Could it be that our calendar is not just inaccurate, but interfered with? Not by emperors or scribes, but by something deeper. What if time itself, or those moving through it, shifted the course of recorded history? Imagine this. An experiment in time manipulation takes place in the distant past. Its effects ripple forward, distorting chronology, creating false centuries, or erasing real ones. Civilizations might have been caught between 2 versions of history, one that endured and one that was overwritten. The concept is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Modern physics acknowledges that time is malleable. General relativity tells us that gravity can bend it. Quantum mechanics hints that observation can change it. If advanced beings once manipulated temporal flow, perhaps history itself became fragmented, rewritten again and again until only pieces remained. This could explain more than just missing centuries. It could explain the strange rhythm of human progress. Ages of darkness, followed by sudden explosions of light. The Renaissance emerging from medieval obscurity like a sudden sunrise. Industrial leaps that seem far too rapid to be purely organic. What if these leaps were not inventions, but reinstatements? Fragments of knowledge restored after each temporal reset. A cycle of forgetting and remembering. Consider this. Every ancient calendar, from the Mayan long count to the Hindu yugas, describes time not as linear but cyclical, repeating in vast cosmic loops. In each cycle, humanity rises, falls, and begins again. Could our historical anomalies, the phantom years, the lost centuries, be the fractures between these cycles? Moments where one version of reality collapsed into another? There are whispers in ancient texts that seem to echo this idea. In Sumerian records, kings rule for tens of thousands of years. Then suddenly, the lengths collapse into human scales. Egyptian dynasties appear older than their supposed founding. Chinese histories contain overlapping reigns and duplicated eras. Even the Bible speaks of mysterious generations that were and are no more. Perhaps these are not exaggerations or translation errors. Perhaps they are records from before a temporal correction, remnants of an older timeline erased when the universe reset itself. Archaeologists often find artifacts that don't belong. A 400-million-year-old hammer embedded in rock, ancient maps depicting Antarctica ice-free, precision gears found in strata millions of years old. Science calls them out-of-place artifacts, ooparts. But if time is not fixed, then perhaps these are exactly where they belong, leftovers from another version of history. If that is true, then our world may be older or newer than we imagine. Not everything we call ancient may belong to our current timeline at all. Some ruins might be the ghost architecture of previous cycles, persisting through the cracks in time. Meanwhile, the human mind, bound by linear perception, rearranges the fragments into a coherent story. History. We see continuity where there might be edits. We call them eras, dynasties, ages. But what if those are merely artifacts of temporal interference, labels for realities that once overlapped? Every now and then, a clue surfaces. A text that doesn't fit, a structure that shouldn't exist, an invention that seems to arrive too soon. They are dismissed as anomalies, but they might be evidence of continuity bleeding through fractured time. And so the question lingers: did humanity truly lose centuries to politics and poor record-keeping? Or were those centuries lost to something greater? Maybe the past is not just missing, it was rewritten, erased, compressed, adjusted to preserve stability after each interference. Perhaps our history is not what it appears. Not a book, but a palimpsest. A manuscript written over and over, each version obscuring the one beneath it. And beneath it all, the faint echo of another timeline still hums, waiting to be remembered. If we could peel back those layers, if we could see the missing ages, what would we find? Another civilization? Another us? Perhaps in the gaps between centuries, the truth of time itself is hiding, watching, like a shadow cast across the ages. High above the Aegean, where sunlight fractures across the water, the Greeks imagined a being older than the mountains themselves. Chronos. Not merely the god of time, as the Romans would later name him, but a primordial force, a consciousness that shaped the very flow of existence. He devoured his children, the myths say, to control the cycles of creation. And yet, beneath the allegory, there may lie a deeper truth. In the stories, Chronos is more than a metaphor. He measures, he bends, he interrupts. Moments collapse under his gaze, events unfold at his whim, and history itself is a tool to be wielded. The ancients saw time as living, elastic, capable of being manipulated by minds attuned to its pulse. Philosophers of the era wrestled with similar ideas. Heraclitus, the weeping philosopher, proclaimed that everything flows. "No man ever steps in the same river twice," he wrote, "for the river, like time, is never static. Every moment is new, yet connected to the last." Parmenides, conversely, insisted on the illusion of change, that reality is one, eternal, unbroken. Two opposing perspectives, yet both hint at an understanding of temporal mechanics far beyond the language of their age. To us, these are philosophy. But could they have been science disguised in metaphor? What if the Greeks were observing time itself as a dimension, one that could be bent, folded, or navigated? What if Chronos was not a deity, but a conceptual representation of temporal mastery? Knowledge once possessed, now lost. The myths support this reading. The Titans, the children of Chronos, represent forces of nature, chaos, and order. By consuming them, Chronos preserves continuity. He controls entropy. He regulates cycles. Perhaps the story encodes an understanding of feedback loops, energy conservation, or even causality. The allegory transforms into a blueprint. Even the Orphic traditions speak of time as layered and recursive. They describe aeons within aeons, worlds rising and falling like nested dolls, each dependent on the integrity of the whole. This resonates uncannily with modern concepts in physics: cyclical universes, temporal loops, and causally closed systems. The ancients may have been mapping the unseen architecture of reality, shrouded in narrative for those unready to comprehend it. Chronos also intersects with dreams. Greek thinkers believed the soul could traverse time during sleep. Oracles and mystics were said to receive visions not merely of the future, but of alternate presents, alternate pasts. In one fragment from the Derveni papyrus, time is described as a spiral, not a line, a staircase the soul can climb up or down toward illumination. Those attuned to its motion could perceive events beyond ordinary perception. The legend of Chronos' children carries a subtle clue. By swallowing them, the god preserves potential energy, the capacity for action and creation. Could this be symbolic of storing temporal data? Memories, knowledge, and events held in stasis, awaiting release when the cycle demands it? In essence, a kind of time capsule encoded in myth. Heraclitus's river and Parmenides' eternal being may describe the same reality from different angles. Time is flowing, change is constant, yet underlying it, a structure persists. One can observe the flow, or one can inhabit it. Those who can inhabit it, or understand its geometry, might navigate epochs as easily as we walk across a room. The Greeks left more than allegory. They left patterns. Temples oriented to solstices and equinoxes. Mathematical ratios embedded in architecture, music, and astronomy. Their philosophies, myths, and monuments suggest a civilization aware of cycles far larger than human lifespans. Perhaps these were not abstract speculations, but applied knowledge. In some way, they encoded instructions for manipulating time, not with machines, but through consciousness, ritual, and observation. Even today, the echoes are unsettling. Consider Plato's myth of air in the Republic, where a man dies, sees the fates of souls across past and future lives, and returns with knowledge of cosmic order. Or the Orphic hymns that speak of souls choosing destinies, stepping into lives in a preordained rhythm. In all cases, time is pliable, cyclical, and navigable. Not linear, not fixed, not absolute. Could it be that the Greeks glimpsed a truth we are only now beginning to approach with quantum theory? That time is a dimension as real as space, one that can twist and fold, one that consciousness can interact with under certain conditions? Chronos was their language for it. A deity personified code. The ancients were obsessed with measurement. They charted the heavens, calculated planetary cycles, and tuned instruments to catch the invisible motion of the stars. Could these efforts have been more than astronomy? Could they have been attempts to map the flow of time itself? To understand where and when to act. The river of Heraclitus flows endlessly, yet within it, hidden currents move in loops, eddies, and spirals. Chronos stands at the center, devouring and releasing, marking the rhythm of existence. And perhaps, in dreams, humans can touch that current, if only briefly. If this is true, then the myths are warnings, guides, and manuals. They are allegories with practical application. To read them literally is folly. To read them carefully, to decode the geometry of their symbolism, may reveal a civilization that knew far more than we give them credit for. Chronos teaches that time is alive. It flows, it folds, it can be manipulated, observed, and preserved. The ancients dreamed it, mythologized it, and perhaps for brief moments touched it. And in the quiet hours, when the wind sweeps across ruins or the stars rise silently above ancient temples, one can almost hear it, the rhythm of time itself, measured, bending, waiting, as if someone, somewhere, is still learning to walk its currents. In the shifting sands of the Arabian desert, under the relentless sun, a strange story was recorded in the 14th century. A manuscript, carefully preserved, tells of a visitor unlike any known to the nomads of the time. He arrived silently, clad not in cloth or leather, but in a gleaming metal that reflected the desert light like liquid silver. The people watched in awe and fear. He spoke no familiar tongue. Yet the manuscript describes his words as a language of light, a series of symbols and sounds that seemed to vibrate in the air, bending perception itself. Those who heard him claimed understanding came not from ears, but from something deeper, an intuition, a recognition of meaning beyond speech. He did not stay. By the next sunrise, he was gone. No footprints remained in the sand. No tracks, no camel caravans, no trace of his passage beyond the whispered memory of those who witnessed him. Historians have dismissed such accounts as allegory, metaphor, or fanciful storytelling. But the patterns repeat across cultures and centuries. In ancient China, travelers tell of men of metal, descending from the mountains. In the Americas, oral traditions speak of visitors appearing suddenly, teaching knowledge, then vanishing into thin air. In medieval Europe, manuscripts describe mysterious armored figures who appeared in fields or forests, speaking riddles and vanishing before dawn. Could these have been something other than myths? Perhaps they were temporal anomalies, travelers displaced, appearing outside their own time. Moments where the flow of chronology bent, allowing someone to step into a world not their own. Consider the mechanics. A traveler moving through time may not appear perfectly synchronized with local reality. They arrive as a stranger, out of context, their appearance strange, their speech incomprehensible. Their presence is fleeting, a brief intersection of two separate epochs. The man in the metal is described performing small but remarkable acts. He traced patterns in the sand, which later seemed to predict the path of storms. He touched plants and stones, which some claimed flourished in unusual ways. The manuscript notes that even the stars seemed to shift slightly during his presence. Subtle, almost imperceptible changes. These details hint at knowledge beyond the ordinary. Not magic, not divine intervention, but applied understanding of natural and cosmic laws. Perhaps he understood time, gravity, or celestial motion in ways that the witnesses could only interpret as miraculous. Other accounts reinforce the possibility. In the deserts of Egypt, travelers spoke of a being who appeared near the pyramids at dusk, glowing faintly, and vanished at dawn. In North Africa, oral traditions tell of luminous visitors who spoke of events centuries ahead, warning tribes of droughts or invasions that would occur long after their disappearance. Could these be the same phenomenon recorded in different languages, different centuries? A thread connecting the anomalous to the chronological, a hint that temporal travel is not a modern invention, but an accidental presence throughout history. The language of light is particularly intriguing. It suggests communication that transcends words. Perhaps these travelers did not need to speak in conventional terms. Perhaps they could transmit meaning directly into the mind, a form of temporal telepathy, or a translation of consciousness across time. The desert is a fitting stage for such encounters. Vast, silent, and eternal, it stretches across the horizon like a bridge between epochs. Moments seem to slow. Shadows stretch unnaturally. The heat distorts reality. A traveler displaced in time might find such landscapes easier to appear in. Spaces where memory and history are sparse, where observers are unprepared to fully comprehend. And yet, the manuscript ends with a haunting detail. The witnesses tried to follow him, but the sand returned to its prior state. The desert erased his passage as if it never happened. Only the words in the manuscript remained. A fragile bridge between a known past and an unknown visitor. Perhaps these accounts are warnings. Encounters with those who traverse time may not be controllable. Their arrival might bend events in ways subtle or profound. History, as we know it, could be influenced by travelers momentarily displaced, appearing, interacting, and vanishing before anyone could fully record them. In every desert, every isolated plateau, every lost valley there may be traces of these fleeting visitors. Monuments, stories, and whispers that mark where time briefly bent. The man in the metal is one among many, a singular instance of a much larger unseen pattern. Centuries later, when we study anomalies in texts, artifacts, or astronomical records, we may begin to recognize them. Not as myth, not as legend, but as echoes. Fleeting evidence of those who once walked between ages, stepping out of their own time and leaving only the faintest trace behind. And as the desert winds shift over the dunes, perhaps they carry with them the memory of such travelers, waiting silently for the next intersection of past and future. Across deserts, mountains, and valleys, the ancients left patterns, symbols, spirals, and arrangements that endure longer than empires. Sacred geometry was everywhere, in temples, pyramids, megaliths, and manuscripts. It was more than art or decoration. It was language, a language designed to speak not to the eye but to the cosmos itself. The Fibonacci spiral, the golden ratio, repeating cycles in architecture, all hint at an understanding of natural order. The Parthenon in Athens, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the temples of Angkor share proportions that reflect harmonic principles, aligning with celestial events in ways that modern architects still struggle to replicate. Some argue these were coincidences or aesthetic choices, but the precision is too consistent, too mathematically exact. Could these patterns encode knowledge beyond architecture and astronomy? Perhaps they are instructions, a way to map time itself, cycles of planets, lunar eclipses, solstices, embedded within stone and design. The ancients encoded their calendars, their understanding of cosmic motion, and perhaps even pathways to navigate the temporal fabric. In India, mandalas and yantras illustrate complex geometry that represents not only spiritual principles, but cosmic rhythms. Each line, circle, and triangle corresponds to vibrations of energy, sometimes correlating to planetary motion and mathematical constants. The spiral of a nautilus, mirrored in temple designs, becomes a map of recurrence, cycles repeating in space and time. Even in megalithic Europe we find similar designs. Stone circles and alignments often reflect harmonic ratios. The stones of Callanish on the Scottish Hebrides or the arrangement at Carnac in France are more than ceremonial. They resonate with astronomical cycles spanning millennia. The same principles appear in the Americas, from Teotihuacan to Chichen Itza. Could it be that these builders were not only marking the stars, but encoding temporal knowledge? Consider this. If time is cyclical, as many ancient cultures believed, then predicting its flow requires understanding those cycles, not just in years, but in decades, centuries, even millennia. The architecture, the symbols, the sacred geometry, all may have been mnemonic devices, preserving the knowledge of cycles that could guide human action long after the builders had passed. Some scholars note that these geometric forms appear in anomalous contexts. Göbekli Tepe, built over 12,000 years ago, contains carvings arranged in spirals, chevrons, and repeating patterns. The complexity is astonishing for a society that predates agriculture. Could these be visual formulas designed to encode astronomical and temporal information for future generations? The ancients also revered numbers. The Mayan calendar, based on intricate mathematics, tracked cycles of Venus, eclipses, and lunar phases with extreme precision. The numbers were not arbitrary. They corresponded to celestial intervals that could predict events centuries ahead. The combination of geometry and mathematics becomes a form of coding, a language to preserve knowledge that stretches beyond human lifetimes. Even in sacred texts, the pattern repeats. The Hebrew Kabbalah assigns numerical values to letters, creating a system where words, numbers, and cosmology intertwine. The Quran and Vedic texts encode astronomical knowledge alongside spiritual instruction. Symbols are not mere ornamentation. They are functional. They are maps, keys, and possibly instructions for navigating time itself. If time travel or temporal awareness existed in antiquity, these codes might have been essential. Physical artifacts alone are fragile, easily lost or destroyed. Encoding knowledge in geometry, cycles, and numbers ensures that information survives, independent of material decay. It is durable, universal, and inherently linked to the rhythms of the universe. Oddly, these codes often overlap cultures separated by continents. Pyramids in Egypt and Mesoamerica, stone circles in Europe and Africa, spirals in Asia, independent yet strikingly similar. Could this indicate a shared understanding, passed through unknown channels? Or perhaps it is evidence of travelers moving through time, leaving instructions for civilizations yet to exist. Some megaliths seem aligned to events thousands of years apart: eclipses, solstices, planetary conjunctions. The codes embedded in stone, in spiral carvings, or in symbolic mathematics may have been markers, precise coordinates for moments in temporal space. A traveler returning to a familiar location could decode these patterns to orient themselves both in the sky and in the timeline. Even today, we find puzzles hidden in the geometry of ancient constructions. The Great Pyramid encodes the length of the solar year, the precession of the equinoxes, and ratios reflecting cosmic constants. At first glance, a pyramid is a tomb. Look closer, and it is a machine of knowledge, a temporal interface, perhaps, disguised as architecture. Could consciousness itself read these patterns? The ancients believed that meditation, ritual, and contemplation aligned mind and universe. By focusing on the geometry, one could theoretically synchronize with natural cycles, perhaps even perceive events outside linear time. The code of time, then, is not merely historical. It is a map, a language, and a legacy. A blueprint left by minds who understood that time was not a straight river, but a vast, flowing ocean. Within it are the keys to navigation, across space and perhaps across epochs themselves. As we study these stones, spirals, and calculations today, the question emerges: did we inherit this knowledge too late? Or has it been waiting for humanity to finally remember its purpose? Every line, every ratio, every alignment is a whisper from the past. The code remains, patient and enduring, echoing across the ages, waiting to be read by those who can perceive its logic. Time, it seems, has been encoded long before we ever imagined we could measure it. And if we listen carefully, the patterns still speak. They speak of cycles, of recurrence, and of knowledge that moves beyond the limitations of any single human life. They speak of the possibility that the ancients, or perhaps those who visited from beyond their era, left behind a language written not in words, but in the eternal geometry of the cosmos. Beneath the blazing Egyptian sun, along the banks of the Nile, the priests spoke in hushed tones of a time before time, the Zep Tepi. The first time, they called it, an age when gods walked among men, shaping the world, teaching its laws, and establishing the patterns of civilization. Stories describe towering beings, radiant in form, who ruled with knowledge far beyond human comprehension. To the modern mind, these are myths, allegories to explain creation, power, and divine authority. But in the hieroglyphs and ritual texts, a peculiar consistency emerges. Zep Tepi is not merely a distant past, it is a template, a beginning that mirrors cycles, implying that the age we inhabit may be a continuation, or a restart, rather than a first creation. The Egyptian calendar and their understanding of celestial mechanics suggest more than sophisticated observation. Priests calculated lunar and solar cycles with astonishing precision, forecasting eclipses and equinoxes centuries in advance. They measured the stars' slow drift, the precession, and incorporated it into their cosmology. Such knowledge hints at a civilization intimately aware of time's cyclical nature, one that may have witnessed the rise and fall of entire epochs. The texts describe the gods' departure not as an ending, but a withdrawal. They went away to return at the appointed time, the inscriptions say. Could this imply that Zep Tepi was not lost, but paused? A temporal reset, a previous timeline folded into the current one, preserved in ritual, myth, and architecture. The monuments of Egypt reinforce this theory. The pyramids, aligned precisely to stars like Sirius and Orion's belt, serve as more than tombs. They encode cycles of the heavens and patterns that repeat across millennia. Could these alignments act as markers of temporal continuity, remnants of the first time, designed to anchor future generations in cosmic rhythm? Oddly, some records describe technology beyond the Bronze Age. Vimanas, magical implements, and powerful artifacts appear in tales that echo the Zep Tepi era. Descriptions suggest the manipulation of energy, flight, and control over natural forces. knowledge inconsistent with historical records of the time. Was this myth, or a faint memory of instruments lost in the reset of time? The concept of cyclical time pervades Egyptian thought. Ra's journey across the sky, Osiris's death and rebirth, and the annual flooding of the Nile all reflect renewal, repetition, and return. Perhaps Tepi represents a much larger cycle, a complete iteration of reality that ended, only to be restarted with subtle continuity. History then becomes layered. The events of one epoch bleed into another, leaving fragments behind as reminders of what once was. Some researchers note discrepancies in king lists and dynastic chronologies. Unexplained gaps, impossible reigns, and sudden leaps in construction and knowledge may hint at a timeline partially erased or reset. The Great Pyramid, precise geometry encodes constants and alignments that seem intended for observers far beyond the pharaoh's era. Were these structures created in the Tepi and preserved for the future? The priesthood's rituals further support this idea. Initiations involved secret knowledge, the calculation of cycles, and the repetition of actions thought to maintain balance between eras. Perhaps they were not merely religious acts, but mechanisms to stabilize the flow of time itself, a safeguard preserving remnants of a previous timeline. Even the myths themselves seem to hint at anomalies. Stories of gods walking among mortals, teaching and then disappearing, repeat across cultures, Sumerian, Mesoamerican, and Vedic. The narrative pattern suggests that Tepi was not a singular mythical event, but an archetype of temporal intervention. The appearance, instruction, and withdrawal of beings who understood and could manipulate time. Could the Tepi be a record of humanity's first exposure to temporal knowledge? A primer encoded in stone, story, and ritual to guide civilizations through cycles of forgetting and remembering. Perhaps it was not a beginning at all, but a carefully preserved bridge between ages. As we study the temples and tombs, the hieroglyphs and the alignments, a subtle pattern emerges. Time in Egypt was never linear. It flowed in loops, folded upon itself, anchored by knowledge only the priests could access. Tepi, then, may be the memory of a world reset, a first age that predates recorded history, yet persists through the fragments left behind. Beneath the pyramids and within the sacred texts, one can almost sense it. The echo of a civilization that understood the machinery of time, that marked the heavens and the earth as if to preserve a previous reality. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the horizon of memory, Tepi still waits. A first time, folded into our own, whispering the knowledge of ages past. Across the ancient world, whispers persist of machines that should not exist. Devices capable of defying nature itself. Some called them gifts of the gods, others forbidden relics. But what if they were something else entirely? Remnants of technologies that once bent time to human will. The Vedic texts of India describe the Vimana, flying chariots of dazzling light. They moved not only across the skies but between realms, appearing and vanishing at will. The Samarangana Sutradhara, an ancient Sanskrit treatise, describes their construction in unnerving detail. Metals that resist heat, engines powered by mercury, sound, or the pulse of the ether. To historians, these are poetic metaphors. To engineers, they sound disturbingly precise. Could these crafts have been temporal vehicles? Machines capable of stepping outside the stream of time itself? In Jerusalem, another legend emerges: the Ark of the Covenant. Said to contain the Word of God, it was also feared for its lethal power. Those who touched it unprepared would perish instantly. Biblical accounts describe it as emitting radiant fire, smoke, and blinding light, behavior oddly reminiscent of a reactor or generator. Some scholars see the Ark not as a mere religious artifact but as a containment device, perhaps storing an energy source beyond the comprehension of its keepers. Its disappearance remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Perhaps it was not lost, but deliberately hidden. Then there is the Mirror of Solomon, said to allow the king to see all things under the heavens, past, present, and future. Texts claim he used it to command spirits and foresee wars. In one apocryphal account, the mirror folded light upon itself to reveal events not yet come to pass. It could be allegory, or the description of a reflective technology, a temporal lens, one capable of viewing parallel moments across time's spectrum. Across continents, stories converge, portals that open to the heavens, chambers where time stood still, artifacts that unleashed unnatural storms. In Mesoamerica, the tales of Quetzalcoatl's shining shield describe a disk that transported him between worlds. In the Tibetan bone texts, ancient masters speak of sky gates, through which they entered timeless realms to commune with gods. And in the Book of Enoch, the Watchers descend through portals of light to walk among men. Separate cultures, identical motifs, gateways between eras. What connects them is the same warning. Each story ends with loss, destruction, or exile. The Vimana are burned or buried. The Ark disappears. Solomon's mirror is shattered. The message is always the same: humanity was not ready. Archaeological curiosities deepen the mystery. Strange vitrified ruins in India, stone fused as if by tremendous heat, appear near sites described in Vedic texts as battlegrounds of the gods. Ancient Sumerian reliefs show figures holding objects that look strikingly like coils or devices, connected by cords. Symbols of energy? And scattered across Mesopotamia are depictions of winged beings emerging from what resemble circular portals. If these were indeed technologies of time, what happened to them? Some theorists suggest a great purge, a conscious effort by priesthoods to destroy or conceal artifacts that threatened reality's stability. To lose control of such machines could unravel causality itself. Others imagine a subtler explanation. Perhaps they were never destroyed at all, merely sealed, waiting for the right conditions to reawaken. The idea of forbidden knowledge is not new. From the myth of Prometheus stealing fire to Adam and Eve tasting the fruit of knowledge, ancient stories warn of humanity overreaching. In each, enlightenment brings both progress and punishment. Perhaps time technology was the truest forbidden fruit, the ability to alter what should remain immutable. Modern scientists glimpse echoes of this forbidden science. Quantum mechanics reveals that observation alone can affect reality. Experiments in retrocausality suggest that the future might influence the past. If the ancients once understood this, not through equations but through machines, then their warnings take on chilling clarity. They were not speaking in metaphor. They were remembering disaster. Maybe the Vimanas were not flying chariots but stabilized time vehicles using energy to shift within the temporal field. Maybe the Ark was a device for anchoring or resetting chronology, a failsafe designed to restore balance when causality fractured. And maybe Solomon's mirror was the last fragment of a network of observation, tools allowing travelers to watch the ripples of time itself. In every legend, there is a recurring phrase: the gods departed and the gates were closed. Perhaps those gates were not to heaven, but to another timeline. Perhaps humanity once stepped too far, glimpsed too much, and paid the price. As dusk falls over the ancient ruins of Egypt, the stones themselves seem to hum faintly with memory. They remember hands that shaped them, eyes that saw too far, minds that reached beyond the stars, and time itself. And somewhere, deep beneath forgotten sands or lost beneath the ocean's floor, those forbidden machines may still sleep, their mechanisms waiting, silent and patient, for the cycle to turn once more. Across the pages of history, there are moments that defy explanation, events so strange they seem almost impossible. Moments when the very sky appeared to pause, the sun froze in the heavens, Shadows lingered unnaturally, and time itself seemed to stall. One of the most famous accounts comes from the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Joshua. During the siege of Jericho, Joshua prays, and the sun stands still over Gibeon, the moon halting over the valley of Aijalon. The text emphasizes that the day was extended, a phenomenon so extraordinary that it allowed an entire battle to conclude. Astronomers have struggled with this passage for centuries. Was it hyperbole, a poetic flourish, or could it describe something more literal? Across the Atlantic, Mesoamerican codices tell of similar events. The Popol Vuh and other Maya records describe days that refused to pass, when the sun lingered and shadows froze across the landscape. Priests recorded these anomalies with precision, marking them alongside celestial cycles and agricultural calendars. They were not interpreted as miracles alone. Often, they were warnings, signs of imbalance, or moments of cosmic significance. The Egyptians, too, left subtle clues. Some texts speak of the sky halting its course during moments of divine intervention. Hieroglyphs show the sun disk suspended in midair, rays stretching unnaturally across the horizon. Art and ritual appear to encode these incidents, marking them as extraordinary, events that interrupted the normal flow of time. Could these widespread stories be mere coincidence? Or do they point to a synchronized anomaly, a global event that spanned continents and cultures? Speculative theorists propose an unsettling idea. What if someone, somewhere, tampered with time itself? A temporal experiment, perhaps accidental or experimental, causing the flow of hours and days to warp across the planet. Ancient observers describe physical phenomena accompanying these anomalies. Birds froze mid-flight, rivers seemed to slow, shadows stretched as if the Earth had slowed its rotation. Some records even describe a sense of profound stillness, a collective pause in human perception. It was as though the world had become a living tableau, suspended between moments. Modern physics offers some curious parallels. General relativity predicts that massive gravitational fields can dilate time, slowing it relative to other areas. Extreme energy fields could theoretically produce localized time anomalies. If ancient civilizations had access to advanced knowledge, hidden, lost, or misinterpreted, could they have experimented with manipulating temporal flow? The myths also hint at consequences. In some accounts, crops withered or animals panicked after the event. In others, people aged differently, or events were misremembered for generations. Could this imply that these were not purely natural phenomena, but disruptions in chronology itself? Perhaps the world was temporarily disconnected from its normal timeline. Oddly, the myths are remarkably consistent across regions. The sun pauses, shadows linger. Observers sense a distortion in the flow of time. Yet the interpretations differ. In one culture, it is divine intervention. In another, a warning. In a third, a mysterious celestial alignment. The convergence suggests that the underlying event may have been shared, a global anomaly recorded through local lenses. Consider the Mesoamerican frozen days further. Maya astronomers kept meticulous records of eclipses, Venus cycles, and lunar movements. They noted that certain alignments coincided with periods of temporal oddities, as if the heavens themselves were calibrated to moments when time could be influenced. Could these events have been markers, intentionally triggered by advanced observers? Or were they accidental byproducts of experiments far beyond human comprehension? Even Joshua's sun could fit into this framework. The description of the sun stopping aligns with a phenomenon we might call a temporal dilation, time stretching, localized in space and affecting perception as well as motion. For the soldiers and observers, one day could extend for hours or even longer, giving the impression that nature itself had paused. The accounts carry another common thread: warning. Each culture treats these incidents as extraordinary and dangerous, not to be trifled with. Perhaps ancient civilizations understood the fragility of temporal balance. A disruption in one place could ripple across regions, influencing agriculture, astronomy, and human perception. They recorded it carefully in codices, hieroglyphs, and oral traditions as cautionary tales encoded in myth. The possibility of a global temporal event raises uncomfortable questions. Was there an experiment gone wrong, leaving its mark across civilizations? Were the gods of legend, in fact, operators or witnesses to such manipulation? Or were these simply the earliest records of natural phenomena we do not yet understand? As the sun sets over Jericho or the Mesoamerican pyramids, the sky may seem to move as always. Yet the stories persist, echoing across millennia. They hint at a day when time itself hesitated, when the world paused and observers felt the extraordinary weight of eternity. Perhaps, somewhere beyond our perception, the currents of time continue to ripple, and those ancient moments, frozen in myth and memory, remain as subtle reminders that the flow of existence is not always as constant as it seems. The sky stood still once, and in its stillness it whispered secrets that humanity is only beginning to glimpse. Across generations, human memory is considered fragile, malleable, and often unreliable. Yet sometimes inconsistencies appear on a massive scale, entire populations recalling events differently from documented history. These phenomena, now called Mandela effects, are modern terms for experiences that may stretch back centuries or even millennia. One famous example is the memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, a collective error so widespread it seemed to transcend ordinary misremembering. But what if these shifts are not errors at all? What if they are echoes of temporal disturbances, ripples caused when the past itself has been subtly altered? Across cultures, similar discrepancies emerge. Ancient texts describe lands, rulers, and events that vanish from the archaeological record. Maps from the medieval period show coastlines and territories that modern history insists never existed. Artifacts appear out of sequence. Civilizations rise and fall with gaps that defy linear explanation. Could these missing memories be fragments of a timeline that was manipulated, edited, or overwritten? Consider oral traditions. Stories passed down for generations often diverge from written records. Yet in certain regions, discrepancies are remarkably uniform. Multiple independent cultures recall events or phenomena in ways that contradict known history, yet align with each other. It is as if memory itself had been rewritten, not in error, but by design. Speculative theorists suggest that temporal travelers, moving through epochs, could leave subtle imprints on collective consciousness. A minor intervention in the past might ripple forward, reshaping how people remember events. Small changes would be absorbed, unnoticed, until the accumulated effect becomes visible across large populations. What we experience as a Mandela effect could be a residual signature of ancient timeline manipulations. Even mythology hints at such disruptions. Stories of gods interfering with mortal affairs, of heroes acting out of sequence, or of time bending to divine will appear in nearly every culture. The Greek myths, the Sumerian epics, and the Hindu Mahabharata all feature anomalies. Events that seem out of chronological order, knowledge appearing before it should exist, and figures acting across ages. Perhaps these are not merely literary devices, but cultural memories of temporal tampering. Historical records themselves offer odd examples. Documents describe rulers disappearing, then reappearing, as if erased from one record only to exist in another. Calendars conflict across regions, as if local timekeeping had been subtly altered. Even astronomical observations occasionally record events in patterns that cannot be reconciled with physics as we understand it. Are these mistakes or deliberate consequences of interference with the continuum? Psychology may provide insight into how humans perceive such disturbances. Memory is reconstructive, not static. When external conditions change, artifacts, architecture, celestial events, our perception of past events can shift. If the environment itself has been subtly altered by temporal influence, collective memory would adjust accordingly, producing dissonance between experience and records. Ancient traditions also hint at safeguards against these effects. Rituals, repetitive chants, and ceremonial reenactments may have served to anchor societies in a stable temporal framework. By embedding knowledge in repeated patterns and symbols, communities could resist the erosion of memory caused by anomalies. Monuments, aligned with stars or cycles, may act as physical stabilizers of chronology, preserving events against potential temporal interference. Some Mandela effects appear absurd on the surface. Logos, spellings, or minor details that shift across generations. Yet, in a broader perspective, they may be small ripples of a larger temporal disruption. The discrepancy in popular culture could be the echo of a much greater, deliberate intervention in human history. Subtle enough to avoid catastrophic consequences, but strong enough to leave a persistent imprint on consciousness. If this is true, then history is not fixed. It is fluid, layered, and malleable, shaped both by human perception and by forces that may have once traversed its currents intentionally. Civilizations may remember events differently, not because memory is faulty, but because reality itself has been reconfigured. As we examine these phenomena, an unsettling possibility emerges. What if the Mandela effects of today are only the surface of deeper, ancient disruptions? What if our understanding of chronology, of cause and effect, is based on a past that has been rewritten before we could ever record it? The continuum we trust is not as solid as we imagine. History may be a palimpsest, overwritten by hands invisible and eras unrecorded. And memory, fragile as it is, may hold the faintest traces of those interventions, glimpses of a reality that once was, or might have been. In this fractured landscape, the human mind struggles to reconcile experience with evidence. Yet even in the dissonance, the echoes persist. Faint, inexplicable, and undeniably persistent. The continuum is shattered, not irreparably but perceptibly. And somewhere within the layers of history and memory, the traces of ancient tampering endure, quietly shaping the way we remember the past and perceive the present. In the quiet corridors of ancient knowledge there exists a recurring motif: beings who transcended the ordinary flow of time. Esoteric traditions across the world speak of sages, teachers, and deities who could move freely between past, present, and future. Thoth in Egypt, the god of wisdom and writing. Hermes Trismegistus, the messenger and master of secrets. Lao Tzu, whose Tao whispers principles of harmony and timelessness. Each is described as existing outside the normal constraints of mortality. In Egyptian texts, Thoth is credited not only with writing and wisdom, but with the invention of mathematics, astronomy, and the very measurement of time itself. He is depicted as a guide to the pharaohs, a teacher to mortals, yet eternally present, untouched by decay. Some traditions suggest he traversed epochs, appearing at critical junctures to guide humanity when the balance of knowledge faltered. Hermes Trismegistus, often associated with Thoth, carries similar attributes. The Hermetic corpus describes principles of alchemy, astrology, and metaphysics that suggest a profound understanding of reality's underlying structure. Hermes is not merely a teacher, he is an orchestrator, a being who perceives the temporal threads connecting cause and effect, and who can intervene when necessary. His writings imply mastery over cycles, over the flow of events, and even hints at the ability to traverse time as we might walk across a field. In China, Lao Tzu is said to have disappeared into the western mountains on a water buffalo, leaving behind the Tao Te Ching, a text of wisdom that transcends history. He speaks of harmony, the flow of the cosmos, and the relativity of existence, all couched in language that hints at perception beyond linear time. The Tao is described as both eternal and cyclical, existing before and after all events, an understanding that aligns closely with the concept of temporal navigation. Could these figures have been more than mystics or mythic symbols? Some theorists propose that they were survivors or emissaries of an older, advanced civilization, one that understood the flow of time, its manipulation, and the consequences of interference. Rather than divine beings, they may have been highly evolved humans, guardians of knowledge, or temporal engineers preserving balance across epochs. Consider the tasks attributed to them. They record history, invent systems of measurement, teach humanity in precise bursts, interventions at key moments. They appear where knowledge is threatened, guiding civilizations through periods of chaos and forgetting. The consistency of their actions across distant cultures suggests intent and comprehension far beyond ordinary human capability. The concept of stepping outside time recurs in multiple traditions. In Kabbalistic teachings, enlightened sages can perceive past, present, and future simultaneously. In Tibetan Buddhism, high lamas describe tulku, beings capable of choosing the timing and circumstances of their rebirth to fulfill specific missions. Even in Norse myth, Odin sacrifices himself on the world tree to gain knowledge across temporal boundaries, returning transformed. If these accounts are taken literally, it implies mastery over a fundamental layer of reality. Time becomes not a river to float upon, but a landscape to navigate. The so-called mystics were not bound by hours, years, or centuries. They moved along the timeline, observing, intervening, and guiding with precision. Oddly, these figures often leave artifacts or teachings encoded for future generations. Thoth's wisdom appears in hieroglyphs and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Hermes's principles survive in alchemical and hermetic texts. Lao Tzu's insights are woven into the fabric of Chinese philosophy. These are not mere documents. They may be anchors, markers placed intentionally to transmit temporal knowledge across ages. Could the myths of gods and immortals themselves stem from the inability of ordinary humans to comprehend these travelers? A being who can step outside time would appear eternal. A person who teaches centuries apart would seem omniscient. A mind capable of perceiving events across multiple epochs would seem divine. Moreover, the impact of these architects is evident in the alignment of human progress. Mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, and navigation appear suddenly in disparate regions, sometimes without obvious cause. Some of these leaps coincide with periods where the sages were said to appear, suggesting subtle interventions to accelerate human capability. Rather than random genius, these could be deliberate guides, calibrating humanity's trajectory across the timeline. Yet their presence is always enigmatic, fleeting, and carefully concealed. They teach, depart, and reappear only when necessary. Like gardeners tending a vast temporal landscape, they cultivate knowledge, prune destructive paths, and leave behind markers for future generations to decipher. Perhaps the sage's greatest lesson is humility. Time is not ours to control, but to understand. By observing the flow, by respecting cycles and patterns, we glimpse a fraction of their mastery. Their survival across myth and history may be proof that knowledge, and those who hold it, can transcend mortality and chronology itself. In this light, Thoth, Hermes, and Lao Tzu may not be the distant gods or abstract mystics of legend. They are the architects of reality, beings who walked the edges of time, who preserved balance, and who left behind a subtle, enduring guide for humanity. And as we study their teachings, we are not merely reading philosophy or myth. We are peering into the mind of those who once knew the rhythm of time and perhaps how to navigate it. Across the continents, scattered in deserts, mountains, and forgotten ruins, there are traces that refuse to fit neatly into our history. Maps carved on stone, artifacts forged in unknown metals, and structures aligned with the heavens in ways that defy explanation hint at knowledge far beyond their supposed eras. These anomalies suggest fractures in the record of time itself, fragments of a past that may have been influenced by forces or visitors not of that age. One of the most striking examples is the ancient depiction of Antarctica. Before the continent was officially discovered and mapped in modern times, some 16th and 17th century maps already portray its coastline as ice-free, detailed, and remarkably accurate. The Peary Race map of 1513, for instance, combines coastlines of South America and Antarctica with precise latitude calculations, showing features that would have been submerged beneath ice for millennia. How could cartographers of that era know what they could not see? Could these maps have been copied from older sources, themselves originating from a time when Antarctica was accessible, or from travelers who moved through time, recording geography that had yet to be discovered? Metal artifacts also pose questions. Bronze and iron objects discovered in geological layers supposedly predating metallurgy challenge the standard timelines. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, resisting corrosion for over a millennium, shows metallurgical sophistication that modern science struggles to replicate. Even more puzzling are reports of metallic spheres, intricate tools, and other objects whose composition and craftsmanship seem to leap centuries ahead. Were these simply misdated relics, or gifts of knowledge left behind by visitors with a grasp of advanced materials? Astronomical alignments offer another layer of intrigue. Structures like Nabta Playa, Göbekli Tepe, and the megaliths of Peru demonstrate precise knowledge of solstices, lunar cycles, and planetary motions. Göbekli Tepe, built over 12,000 years ago, aligns with the rising of Sirius in ways that would seem impossible for a pre-agricultural society. The precision suggests not guesswork, but observation, calculation, and intent. Could this knowledge have been left intentionally, preserved for future generations? Or could it be evidence of visitors capable of moving across time, recording astronomical truths from eras yet to come? Maps, artifacts, and architecture collectively form a puzzle that defies linear chronology. The correlation between disparate cultures is remarkable. Structures in Mesoamerica mirror alignments found in Egypt. Megaliths in Europe reflect cycles also noted in India. Did knowledge travel across continents through normal trade and diffusion, or through the hands of those who navigated time itself? Consider legends of sky people and gods descending from the heavens. These beings often imparted advanced knowledge, mathematics, writing, astronomy, and engineering. In every culture, these stories converge on one idea: knowledge arriving from beyond the immediate temporal and spatial context. The anomalies in our record, maps, metals, monuments, may be the tangible remains of these interactions. Oddly, some records even hint at lost civilizations. Tales of Atlantis, Lemuria, and other advanced societies persist, though their physical evidence is scarce. Could these myths preserve memories of cultures visited, influenced, or even replaced by travelers operating outside the normal flow of history? Artifacts and structures that remain today might be the only remnants of those encounters. In addition to material evidence, chronological inconsistencies pepper historical records. Dynasties appear, vanish, and reappear. Reigns overlap impossibly. Knowledge surfaces, disappears, and resurfaces again. Archaeologists often attribute these anomalies to incomplete records or mythologized history. But if time itself has been tampered with, these fractures in the record may be the residual echoes of such interventions. Even natural phenomena seem to bear witness. Rock formations, crater alignments, and planetary observations in ancient texts sometimes correspond to events that science confirms only occurred much later. Maya astronomers, for instance, recorded Venus cycles and eclipses centuries in advance. Did they calculate with extraordinary intuition, or did someone, somewhere, provide them with information ahead of their era? The possibility of temporal visitors reshapes our understanding of history. The past is not a closed, linear narrative, It may be layered, intersected, and occasionally rewritten, intentionally or inadvertently, by those moving through epochs we can scarcely comprehend. Maps, artifacts, and monuments are not only evidence of human ingenuity, they may also be signposts left by observers who could navigate the temporal landscape. If this is true, the implications are profound. Civilizations we assume were isolated might have shared knowledge across time. Technologies considered impossible may have existed in ways that challenge our understanding of progress. And the records we rely on, written, carved, or etched into stone, may be but fragments of a larger timeline, a timeline occasionally punctured by visitors from the future. As we explore ancient ruins, study enigmatic artifacts, and trace celestial alignments, a question lingers. What if the past we know is only a portion of what truly occurred? Perhaps we are seeing the residual footprints of those who traveled not only across space but through time itself. The fractures in the record are subtle yet persistent, reminders that history may not be entirely ours, and that the past might still bear the signature of visitors from ages yet to come. Across continents and centuries, prophecies speak in strangely similar terms: the return of beings, guides, or watchers who once walked among humanity. In every culture, these figures are described as appearing at pivotal moments, times of upheaval, transition, or revelation. But what if these prophecies are not metaphors for reincarnation, spiritual awakening, or divine intervention? What if they are records of literal returns, temporal navigators re-entering history in cycles, following patterns their predecessors once established? In Mesoamerican tradition, the Quetzalcoatl cycle describes the god-king who left, promising to return in a future age. Codices mark specific intervals, suggesting a synchronization with celestial events. Similarly, the Hopi prophecies speak of the blue star Kachina, a harbinger signaling the reemergence of ancient wisdom. Across the Atlantic, in Judeo-Christian texts, messianic figures are foretold to arrive again at ordained moments. In Hinduism, Kalki, the final avatar of Vishnu, is prophesied to descend at the end of a cosmic cycle, restoring balance and renewing dharma. What is striking is the consistency of these cycles. Though cultures are separated by vast distances and millennia, their predictions converge on the notion of return, not as abstract or symbolic, but precise, timed, and transformative. Could these returns correspond to temporal intervention rather than myth? Could the travelers who influenced the first cycles of human civilization simply reappear at intervals, guided by knowledge of time itself? Legends often describe these returns with unusual characteristics. They arrive suddenly, with knowledge beyond the current era, appearing as both teachers and agents of change. In some accounts, they wield advanced tools, navigate the stars with uncanny precision, or influence events in ways that ordinary humans cannot comprehend. To contemporaries, such visitors are gods, heroes, or spirits. To those who understand the mechanics of time, they may be navigators, operators stepping into history from a previous or future point. Oddly, these accounts also emphasize preparation and recognition. Signs, omens, and encoded instructions often precede the arrival of these figures. In Mesoamerica, priests recorded astronomical alignments. In Egypt, temple hieroglyphs indicate patterns in the stars. Even in biblical texts, the faithful are instructed to observe and interpret portents before the prophesied figure appears. It is as though the world itself is tuned to detect these temporal returns, awaiting their moment with clocks set to cosmic rhythms. Historical episodes hint at actual visits. Figures suddenly introduce knowledge that changes technology, science, or governance almost overnight. Civilizations leap forward unexpectedly, achieving feats that seem premature for their era. Some scholars cite the sudden appearance of advanced mathematics in Babylon, precise astronomical tables in Greece, or complex urban planning in the Indus Valley as possible markers of intervention. Could these leaps coincide with the cyclical returns of travelers, each visit accelerating human potential? Even folklore preserves subtle memories. Stories of mysterious strangers who taught, vanished, and reappeared generations later echo across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. The pattern is remarkably consistent: arrival, imparting of wisdom, disappearance, and eventual return. Could this represent a literal temporal schedule, orchestrated by beings with the ability to navigate the flow of ages? The timing of these returns is often linked to cosmic cycles. Solar, lunar, and planetary alignments are recurrent motifs in prophetic texts. Calendars and astronomical tables encoded these cycles, not merely for agriculture or ritual, but possibly to mark windows of opportunity for temporal intervention. The travelers' reappearances may be synchronized with these cycles to maintain balance, influence civilization, or prevent catastrophic divergences in the timeline. The psychological impact on societies cannot be overlooked. The arrival of a seemingly divine or prophetic figure reshapes culture, law, and collective behavior. Populations suddenly gain knowledge or insight that seems otherworldly, shifting the trajectory of development. Legends record awe, fear, and reverence, leaving behind stories that survive long after the traveler departs. In this way, temporal visitors leave not only physical or technological traces, but also cultural and psychological imprints. Could humanity be caught in an ongoing series of such visits? If time is cyclical and navigable, then the appearances recorded in myth may continue into our era. Prophecies might serve not only as warnings but as records of previous interventions, encoded to guide or prepare future generations. Those who study the patterns of history, mythology, and astronomy may begin to detect the faint outlines of a schedule written across ages. As the stars wheel overhead tonight, the possibility remains. The travelers may be walking among us now, unseen, waiting for their appointed cycle. The prophecies are not just stories. They may be coordinates, markers of return, echoes of knowledge preserved across millennia. Each alignment, each mysterious figure, each leap in human understanding may be part of a larger rhythm, a rhythm of return, guiding humanity subtly through the ages. And perhaps when the next cycle arrives, the veil will lift briefly. The architects of time will reappear, just as they have before, walking into our reality, bridging the past, present, and future once more. The return of the travelers may be not a hope, but an inevitability, encoded in history, myth, and the very structure of time itself. In quiet temples and hidden sanctuaries, ancient civilizations sought more than material wealth or political power. They sought understanding, not just of the stars, the seasons, or the earth, but of time itself. Philosophers, mystics, and priests speculated that time was not a simple river flowing forward, but a dimension as complex and expansive as space. And in these contemplations lies a provocative possibility, that the human mind, in ages long past, may once have perceived time directly. In Vedic India, the concept of Chit and Kala intertwines consciousness and temporality. The sages described moments of expanded awareness where past, present, and future coexisted. Meditation and ritual were tools, not merely for spiritual growth, but potentially for calibrating the mind to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously. The cycles of yugas, the great wheels of creation and decay, may not have been metaphors alone. They could encode experiential knowledge of temporal flow accessible to human consciousness. In the Mediterranean world, Greek philosophers explored similar ideas. Heraclitus wrote that reality is in constant flux, emphasizing that time is a child playing, hinting at a perception beyond ordinary chronology. Plato and Parmenides speculated on the nature of being, of eternal truths, and of a world where past and future are folded into the present. These philosophical musings may conceal practical insights, rituals and contemplations designed to attune the human mind to the subtleties of temporal perception. Oddly, this theme emerges across cultures. The shamans of Siberia speak of journeys beyond the linear, navigating past and future as though moving through landscapes. Tibetan meditators describe tulku awareness, where the mind perceives multiple incarnations and timelines. The Hopi and Maya performed ceremonies aligned with celestial events, perhaps as cognitive scaffolds to experience moments outside ordinary temporal perception. Could these rituals have been a form of temporal training, cultivating latent abilities once natural to humanity? Modern physics may offer insight into this ancient potential. Einstein revealed that time is not absolute, but relative, intertwined with space and energy. Quantum mechanics suggest that observation influences reality, and retrocausal effects hint that the future may affect the past. If the human mind is a complex quantum system, could it once have accessed these dimensions directly, perceiving timelines and probabilities without the need for machines? Ancient rituals, then, may have been attempts to synchronize the mind with the underlying fabric of reality. Consider monuments and sacred architecture. Temples, ziggurats, and stone circles often encode astronomical and calendrical precision. These are not just external markers. They may have been instruments for consciousness, designed to focus, attune, and align the human mind with cyclical and linear aspects of time. The alignment of megaliths with solstices or equinoxes may have been intended to amplify perception, creating conditions where the past and future could be sensed as vividly as the present. Memory itself may have been shaped by this awareness. The earliest records often contain knowledge that seems anachronistic. Astronomical observations, sophisticated engineering, philosophical insight. If the human mind once had access to a broader temporal awareness, such advanced knowledge might have been a natural extension of perception, not mere coincidence or divine gift. Over time, as civilizations shifted, the ability may have waned, leaving only fragmented practices, encoded rituals, and myths. Even mythology preserves this concept. Heroes often travel across time. Gods appear before and after human lifespans, and sages possess knowledge that transcends generations. Perhaps these stories are not allegories alone, but memory echoes of an era when humans could navigate temporal landscapes with the mind alone. The continuity of these motifs across cultures suggests a shared ancestral capacity, now largely forgotten. There are also tantalizing hints in art and language. Mandala patterns, sacred geometry, and repetitive chants may encode temporal frameworks, guiding perception toward nonlinear awareness. Language itself, carefully structured prayers, poetic meter, and mnemonic devices, could serve as temporal anchors, helping practitioners integrate experiences across different layers of time. What seems like ritual or art may, in fact, be a map of consciousness in time. Yet, if this capacity once existed, its loss may explain why humanity often struggles to perceive time beyond the immediate. History becomes fragmented, prophecies obscure, and causality appears linear and unyielding. The mind, once a vessel capable of temporal navigation, now relies on instruments and calculations to glimpse patterns that were formerly intuitive. Speculatively, ancient humans may have left behind reminders, monuments, myths, and rituals, not as relics of belief, but as instructions. They encoded knowledge of time itself into enduring structures, hoping that future generations might rediscover the capacity to perceive it. Perhaps meditation, astronomy, and ceremonial observation were all steps toward awakening latent abilities that allowed one to witness multiple timelines, to read the past and future directly. As night falls over the ancient ruins of temples and stone circles, one can almost sense the lingering resonance of these practices. The wind through the columns, the shadows cast by the moon, the alignment of stars overhead. Each seems to whisper of a human mind once capable of extraordinary temporal perception. Time may not be a fixed stream after all, but a landscape, and consciousness its traveler. The memory of time is not merely in clocks or records, but embedded in us, a capacity mostly forgotten, yet preserved in ritual, myth, and architecture. Perhaps one day, through study, practice, or intuition, humanity may awaken once more to perceive the vast, interwoven patterns of past, present, and future, and reclaim the ancient ability to walk the corridors of time with the mind itself. Across the past century, physics has begun to challenge our most basic assumptions about reality. Wormholes, quantum loops, and retrocausality suggest that time is neither fixed nor linear, but flexible, capable of bending, folding, and looping upon itself. Yet, long before Einstein, Schrödinger, or Hawking, myths and esoteric teachings across the world hint at a similar understanding, encoded in allegory, ritual, and architecture. Perhaps modern science is not discovering something entirely new, but rediscovering knowledge humanity once held, the hidden equation of time itself. Consider wormholes, theoretical bridges connecting distant points in space and, potentially, moments in time. Physicists describe them as shortcuts through the fabric of space-time, allowing travel that seems impossible by ordinary means. Now look to mythology. In Mesopotamian stories, gods traverse great distances instantaneously, appearing in human settlements without visible means of passage. In Hindu epics, beings move between realms, appearing in distant times and places as though slipping through invisible corridors. The descriptions may be allegorical, yet they align uncannily with the principles physicists are exploring today. Quantum loops and retrocausality further blur the boundary between cause and effect. Experiments suggest that actions in the present can influence outcomes in the past, and that events are entangled in non-linear networks of probability. Ancient texts, too, hint at such dynamics. Oracles, prophets, and sages claimed to perceive future events and adjust their present actions accordingly. Stories of gods altering history, humans seeing premonitions, and cosmic cycles repeating themselves suggest that knowledge of temporal entanglement was once accessible, perhaps even practical. Oddly, mathematics provides another link. Sacred geometry, Fibonacci sequences, and harmonic ratios appear across ancient architecture, from Egyptian pyramids to Greek temples to Mayan pyramids. These designs are not merely aesthetic. They encode cycles, ratios, and alignments that correspond to celestial and temporal phenomena. Could these have been early attempts to map the hidden equation, to inscribe the rules of time into stone and rhythm? Some researchers speculate that advanced civilizations, or travelers with temporal knowledge, encoded mathematical keys to navigate the continuum. Even language and symbolism hint at deeper understanding. The Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, recurs across continents and centuries, a universal emblem of cycles and eternal return. Time in Egyptian hieroglyphs is represented by recurring patterns, suggesting awareness of nonlinear progression. The Mayan calendar, with its intricate cycles and overlapping counts, encodes a perception of time that is simultaneously linear, cyclical, and relational. These motifs resemble the very mathematical models modern physicists use to describe loops, oscillations, and feedback across space-time. Some anomalies in ancient records may be evidence of applied temporal knowledge. Records of eclipses, planetary positions, and astronomical phenomena often predate the ability to calculate them using contemporary methods. Maps of distant lands, knowledge of distant civilizations, and precise engineering feats appear centuries or millennia before conventional understanding suggests they should exist. Could these be not coincidences or divine inspiration, but the result of applying principles of time itself, harnessing knowledge embedded in the hidden equation? Modern physicists also confront paradoxes that echo ancient warnings. Grandfather paradoxes, causality loops, and temporal feedback challenges resemble mythic tales of meddling with fate, gods punished for interfering with human history, and heroes trapped in cycles of inevitability. These narratives may not be fanciful. They could be cultural memory of temporal interventions, encoded as cautionary allegory. The hidden equation, it seems, has always been double-edged. Knowledge powerful enough to alter events, yet perilous if misunderstood. Consider the possible implications. If humanity once understood or glimpsed the hidden equation, then myths, rituals, and sacred texts are fragments of a lost science, a proto-physics of time. The great teachers, architects, and sages may have been practitioners, preserving and transmitting this knowledge through symbols, cycles, and oral tradition. We are not only rediscovering what they knew, we are beginning to grasp the framework they once navigated intuitively, before it was largely forgotten. The alignment of science and myth becomes even more remarkable when considering scale. Quantum mechanics operates on the minuscule, relativity on the cosmic. Yet both frameworks describe phenomena that ancient cultures encoded in human-scale, accessible forms. Mathematics, monuments, rituals, and stories may have been the interface, the bridge between human perception and the hidden mechanisms of reality. Time, space, and consciousness were woven together in patterns we are only now beginning to decode. Even the concept of consciousness itself may have been central to the hidden equation. Modern theories propose that observation affects reality, that consciousness may play a role in the collapse of quantum states. Ancient mystics emphasized perception, mindfulness, and attunement, practices that could, in theory, tune the mind to perceive or influence temporal patterns. In this light, meditation, ritual, and sacred geometry were not merely symbolic, but functional methods of interacting with the structure of reality. The hidden equation, then, is not only a scientific formula, but a philosophy of integration. It bridges physics, consciousness, and mythology, uniting the tangible and intangible. It explains why advanced knowledge appeared prematurely in ancient civilizations, why myths persist across continents, and why time itself may be more pliable than we ever imagined. As modern science uncovers wormholes, retrocausal effects, and temporal loops, we are reconnecting with the insights of our ancestors. The myths of Thoth, Hermes, Lao Tzu, and other temporal architects may not be stories at all, but records of practical understanding. The hidden equation lies buried in plain sight, encoded in art, ritual, mathematics, and consciousness, a formula humanity once grasped and is now only beginning to remember. Perhaps, as we decipher it further, we will see history not as a fixed sequence, but as a malleable field, and time not as a river, but as a landscape we can traverse, echoing the wisdom and the warnings left behind by those who first unlocked the hidden equation. Across the span of human history, a curious pattern emerges. Civilizations rise, achieve extraordinary feats, and then fade into obscurity, leaving behind mysteries that later generations struggled to decipher. The cycles repeat. Knowledge blossoms, is partially lost, then rediscovered, as if history itself is caught in a looping rhythm. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and philosophy appear, vanish, and resurface across cultures separated by centuries and continents. It is as though humanity is moving through a loop, awakening to understanding, forgetting it, and awakening again, over and over. Consider the sudden leaps in technology and knowledge. The Sumerians possessed sophisticated mathematics and writing systems. The Egyptians engineered monumental pyramids aligned precisely to the stars. The Mayans tracked Venus with remarkable accuracy. Centuries later, similar advances seem to occur independently in distant regions. Greeks refine geometry, Chinese invent intricate astronomical devices, Europeans eventually develop scientific instruments far surpassing ancient achievements. Could this repetition reflect more than coincidence? Could history itself be structured intentionally or not in a cycle of remembering and forgetting? Even myth points to this looping nature. Legends of gods descending, teaching, departing, and promising to return echo across continents. The Quetzalcoatl cycle in Mesoamerica, the Kalki avatar in India, and the Judeo-Christian messianic prophecies all hint at repeated interventions, moments where higher knowledge re-enters human awareness. Some myths even describe civilizations destroyed or reset, leaving survivors to rebuild, preserving fragments of ancient wisdom for the next cycle. Oddly, these cycles are mirrored in natural and cosmic rhythms. Solar, lunar, and planetary cycles were observed, recorded, and ritualized by ancient societies. Celestial alignments marked eras, guided agricultural and religious practices, and perhaps even dictated windows of opportunity for temporal events. It is as if humanity, consciously or unconsciously, synchronized with cycles not only in nature but in time itself, aware at some level of the loops surrounding them. The repeating patterns extend to memory and record. The lost centuries, abrupt technological leaps, and anomalies in historical records may not be failures of documentation alone. Some historians propose the phantom time hypothesis, suggesting deliberate alteration or omission of time. Yet another perspective emerges when viewed through the lens of cycles. These gaps could represent moments when knowledge was temporarily withdrawn or inaccessible, intervals in the loop where understanding is intentionally forgotten before the next awakening. Consider the parallels in scientific development. Ideas emerge, reach remarkable sophistication, then vanish, only to reappear centuries later in a new guise. Alchemy transforms into chemistry, astrology informs astronomy, philosophy becomes physics. The loop manifests not only in myth or legend, but in the evolution of knowledge itself, as if humanity is repeatedly tracing the same path, guided by invisible hands or natural rhythms. Time travel, in this context, may be more than theory. If advanced civilizations or temporal architects existed, their influence could be embedded in these cycles. The knowledge they introduced, whether through artifacts, myths, or direct teaching, might have been periodically withdrawn, allowing humanity to rediscover it only when ready. In this way, the loops serve both as instruction and as protection, a rhythm to guide civilizations without overwhelming them prematurely. Even our perception of history seems cyclical. Wars, societal collapses, cultural renaissances. These patterns repeat with eerie familiarity. Political systems rise and fall, philosophies are rediscovered, and technologies evolve along familiar trajectories. It is as if the past echoes into the present, carrying reminders of previous awakenings and forgotten knowledge. The evidence is subtle but pervasive. Structures aligned to astronomical events appear repeatedly across millennia. Artifacts resurface that predate their supposed technological context. Myths echo the same motifs: visitors from another time, lost wisdom, cycles of creation and destruction. These repetitions suggest that civilization itself may be operating within a loop, a continuum of remembering and forgetting orchestrated by forces we barely understand. The philosophical implications are profound. Are we pioneers, inventing time travel and advanced understanding for the first time? Or are we merely rediscovering what was already known, echoes of a knowledge lost and regained in previous cycles? History, technology, and myth begin to blur, hinting at a reality where human progress is not linear but cyclical, a pattern that may extend far beyond our immediate perception. Perhaps the loop is not merely historical but experiential. Every civilization, every culture, every individual participates in the rhythms of learning, loss, and rediscovery. Our own scientific breakthroughs, philosophical insights, and explorations of time may be echoes of patterns humanity has already traversed. We are not isolated in our curiosity. We are inheritors of a repeating rhythm that has shaped the trajectory of consciousness itself. As the sun rises and sets across ruins that have witnessed millennia, the question lingers: are we the first to seek the secrets of time, or merely the latest to remember them? The loop continues, silently guiding the flow of civilizations, knowledge, and perhaps even the very perception of time itself. And in that eternal rhythm, every discovery is both new and ancient, a reminder that history may not only record our past but orchestrate our future, in cycles we are only beginning to perceive. Beneath the vast, indifferent sky, silent ruins stretch across deserts, forests, and mountains. Columns topple into sand, stones etched with unknown symbols catch the fading light, and the wind carries whispers of stories long forgotten. As the stars wheel overhead, it becomes clear that these remnants are more than monuments. They are messages left behind by those who came before, or perhaps by those who came after. For perhaps the ancients did not merely dream of time travel. Perhaps they achieved it, walked its corridors, and left subtle traces scattered across history. Consider the myths passed down through generations. They are not only allegories but warnings, cryptic, layered, and persistent. Stories of gods who vanished, heroes who traversed impossible distances, and sages who foresaw events centuries in advance may record actual experiences of temporal navigation. The details embedded within these myths, the repeated motifs, and the precision of astronomical, mathematical, and architectural knowledge suggest intention, a deliberate encoding of understanding beyond the ordinary span of a human lifetime. Artifacts scattered across the globe reinforce this possibility. The Antikythera Mechanism, megalithic observatories, precise calendars, and inexplicable technological artifacts all hint at knowledge that defies their era. Some may dismiss these as coincidence or the ingenuity of lost civilizations, yet their distribution and sophistication suggest something more, a hidden curriculum left behind by those who understood time itself. Perhaps these objects were guides, reminders, or tools designed to be discovered when humanity reached a level of awareness capable of comprehending them. Even our scientific frameworks hint at continuity. Modern physics edges toward concepts that ancient civilizations seem to understand intuitively: cyclic time, retrocausality, and the interweaving of consciousness with the temporal dimension. Mathematics and geometry, encoded in sacred sites and artifacts, mirror formulas that today allow us to theorize about wormholes and quantum loops. Could it be that the boundaries we are pushing against now were already known, experienced, and preserved in human memory millennia ago? History itself may be a palimpsest, written and rewritten by those who could navigate time. Dynasties rise and fall, empires vanish, knowledge is lost and recovered, patterns repeating across ages, suggesting that civilization is neither linear nor accidental. Perhaps these loops are guided by the travelers themselves, operating on timescales that exceed ordinary human comprehension. Our rediscovery of technology, mathematics, and philosophy may not be innovation alone, but an echo of what was once fully known. There is an unsettling implication in this line of thought. If time travel or temporal navigation existed, then humanity may not have been first to walk the corridors of history. We are inheritors of knowledge, fragments scattered across ages, piecing together a reality partially glimpsed by those who came before. The lessons, warnings, and codes left behind may not only be historical, they may be safeguards, instructions, or even tests. We are deciphering a message written in stone, myth, and memory. A message that could only be understood through curiosity, patience, and insight. Oddly, echoes of these visitors persist even in contemporary accounts. Legends of mysterious figures appearing at pivotal moments, inexplicable technological discoveries, and historical leaps out of context suggest interventions that defy standard explanation. Could these be residual traces of the original travelers, or perhaps subsequent visitors moving through cycles of time, ensuring the continuity of knowledge and influence across generations? The evidence is subtle but pervasive, as if someone or something is watching, guiding, or waiting. As we look to the stars, we may feel a sense of kinship with these temporal architects. The same constellations they observed, the same celestial rhythms they encoded, continue to govern our perception of cycles and time. Perhaps, from another age, they still observe, leaving behind signs for those ready to see. The alignment of myth, science, and history may be intentional, a quiet testimony that time itself is not solely ours to command. In this light, the ruins are no longer silent. They whisper across millennia, carrying knowledge, caution, and wonder. The monuments, myths, and artifacts are not merely relics but echoes, reminders that human curiosity has always brushed against forces far beyond ordinary comprehension. Time, memory, and history may be less about the past and more about continuity, connection, and cyclical awakening. And so, perhaps we were never first. Perhaps the discoveries, the insights, and the advances we prize as our own are rediscoveries. Moments in a cycle where humanity touches again what was once known. The ancients may have walked corridors we cannot yet traverse, left messages we are only beginning to decode, and glimpsed patterns of existence that remain partially veiled. As the stars wheel silently above, the thought lingers. Maybe they are still watching, from another age, observing the echoes of their own footsteps in our world. Perhaps the lessons are ongoing, the experiment unfinished, and the message eternal. Time is vast, history layered, and civilization itself a loop of remembering and forgetting. And in that quiet continuum, one truth emerges. The story of humanity is not only ours to write, it is part of a much larger rhythm, a dance across ages, guided by hands we may never fully see. Maybe, just maybe, we are not alone in time.